kind of a one-person team here. So let's go back. How have you been? It's been. How you doing, Mike?
From Pandemic Central.
Yeah, for real. I think I dubbed this the art clubhouse. So
Yeah, yeah. A lot of making comics, a lot of reading comics, a lot of
that's
hanging out
good.
and watching TV, that kind of stuff.
That's good. It's
Yeah, man.
have you been have you been picking up books, new ones lately, or just going through some old ones?
I have a graphic novel collection that's pretty serious, shelves and
Okay.
shelves. So I've got plenty of stuff that I haven't read in years or haven't read at all that I
Oh,
got to
that's
dig
true.
into. Yeah.
I I need to. I can start digging. It's been a while since I read a lot of my books. I can start digging back into them. They've been great.
Yeah. So far this week I read Esteros Polyp by David Mazzucchelli.
Okay.
And I also read A Dame to Kill For by Frank Miller.
Oh, nice. I remember someone saying like he said look through the Sin City books, and because he was comparing Sin City and like Mike Mignola with Hellboy, he said the Sin City the everything just looks cool. Like the pages are just amazing. So it helps strengthen areas of storytelling. And then on the other side of it with Mignola, how he draws, he never needs to really dive into perspective and actual things. He can get away with not without bothering with that kind of craft and just do his storytelling another way. And I thought about too with Frank and Sin City. It's like, oh yeah, like everything is just a cool shot. It could be the storytelling could be tighter in some areas probably, but you get the whole gist of it in a cool looking, which is probably why Rodriguez and Tarantino are a good fit for his style.
Well, he stripped everything down to like that Mickey Spillane, that hard boiled, just kind of microcosm of crime noir. You know?
Yeah. Have you ever seen his Sin City pages in person? I haven't had a chance to like run across one at some point.
Now he's held on to most of his
Oh,
stuff.
okay.
Those are you don't see them out in the wild too much.
Okay, because I heard him talking about like techniques with the black and white and like carving into the paper and doing like splatters and things like that. So I was just really curious to see what it looked like in person.
I know he does his thumbnails full size with a Sharpie.
Oh, I can see that.
Yeah, he does black and red Sharpies, and he does them huge. They're big.
That's
Or at least
dope.
that's what I've heard. I've seen some pictures and stuff like
Okay.
that. And yeah. So
Because we were going to talking about like Comic Cons, and I think one of the best things about Comic Cons is being able to see the physical art in person. And I remember,
well, like
hmm?
I was just gonna say, like you, I'm a Comic Con veteran. I've been, probably to what do you think, 500, 600 cons we've been
Oh
to? Or
yeah,
something like that?
probably. I remember
Yeah.
my first one. I have because I have the booklet. It's the Dallas Fantasy Fair, like 97, 98 ish. The last two, I have the program book for. And I always tell people, like I've been saying on this podcast, I don't know how I knew. I just remember going. I probably saw a flyer at a Lone Star because that's where I used to go when I was younger. The one in Mesquite, and
Right.
then back when there was comic, there was like there's that one. There was Voyager's Dream. There's like Big World down the road, and then another one in Garland. Just comic shops everywhere. It was crazy.
Well, Dallas is a pretty good environment for comic shops. We have 7 or 8 decent comic shops here, and 3 or 4 really, really good ones.
Yeah,
And that's great because you travel the nation. There's some states that don't have comic shops, man.
that's bizarre. It's been dwindling, but yeah, I remember
Oh,
ending up
it's
at
going to dwindle a lot more now, sir. I hate to tell you,
it's
it's a real problem.
I think it's pivoting. Like it's becoming. I know because GameStop I read somewhere is doing something very similar in that they're moving away from being a pure retail store and they wanted to become like gaming community centers, like where you have tournaments and have events and things like that. Um,
Well, you've been to Madness, right? That's kind of
Mhm.
their business model.
Yeah.
They have a lot of that.
I think the new comic shop is more like a nerdy hangout den where there's stuff to look at, stuff to play, all these different Venn diagrams that overlap each other, kind of like that way everybody can be covered in the little nerdums and things.
Well, in the real world, in the non-comic world, what I do for a living is business facilitation and artwork for businesses. So when I'm facilitating, I always advise the customers that have some kind of retail shop that it should really be about the whole concept, not just singular products. So
Yeah,
basically, what you're saying, like a comic shop wouldn't make its living just on selling comics. It would explore the entire fandom and have proper merch or gaming or whatever it is for their culture. But it's an immersion type of
yeah,
store. It's everything about the culture.
yeah. When I was in the
Yeah.
trade show industry, it was about building an experience for them to walk through and leaving the location with holding on to that experience and wanting to come back, or at least remembering the brand.
Yeah.
It's making a big
Yeah.
impact on them.
Yeah, and when places become places where you can get educated in what you love, not just buy what you love, but become educated, hang out, talk, meet people, learn deeper, all kinds
Yeah.
of experiences. That's when shops really thrive, I think.
And same thing with Comic Cons. Back to it. Some of
Oh yeah,
my best lessons in storytelling were at Comic Cons. I remember me and Jake were working on a thriller book, and we went to AggieCon down in College
yep.
Station, super tiny, and we were able to sit down with Stealth Freeze for like 2 hours, and he just talks like, all right, we need to talk about storytelling. He's like, all right, let's go, and he just went through the whole gamut of it. I was like, oh, this is awesome.
That's the dude right there, man.
Yeah, I was lucky I was catching him. I think that was his final AggieCon appearance, at least for a while. I know he went a couple of years in a row. But I think he said, or the idea was a lot of the crew that he used to hang out with had moved on to other things. So I was like, oh, this is kind of different. I'll take a break and maybe I'll come back later.
Well, he still makes it out to Dallas every once in a
Yeah,
while. I see his name on stuff.
AggieCon is
Yeah.
weird. AggieCon, they got like Neil Gaiman once, and they got some
Wow.
other overseas people a few times. I was like, how? And it's tiny. Maybe 100 people, maybe, I think, at the time. I was like, Jesus, how do you pull this off?
Here, I got a question for you. Do you have a dream con that you would like to go to sometime?
Let's see. Right now, it's Emerald City. Emerald City
Yeah.
is a lot of artists, and it's been, and a lot of, because I've been to Heroes on the East Coast, and so a lot of the East Coast artists will go to that one. But there's some West Coast people who won't come all the way over, and so they'll stick to that side. So, Emerald City, I've heard like Long Beach is pretty art heavy. I've been to Chicago Comic Con when it was freshly Wizard World. I think they were just a Wizard World not too long, so that was interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I've been to like all different regions of the United States. So Emerald City is the one I need to try out. What's yours? Like, what's one you've been trying to get to?
Someday I would love to go to the Lake Como Comic Art Festival in Italy.
Oh,
Do
okay.
you know much about
Oh, I I think I've seen pictures of that event because the heavy hitters go. You're like, oh shit, what were they doing in Italy? Okay, oh this thing.
that? Cha-ching.
Yeah.
But check this out. It's all about the art. So there's no book dealers. There's no back
Oh,
issues dealers. It's
yeah.
100% of the guests are artists. I think they only sell 500 tickets a day.
Oh,
So they're like $200, but you're one of only 500 that get into the con,
yeah, that makes
and
sense.
it's in a beautiful location. But it's not even near a giant city or anything. So you got to
Oh,
spend some money to fly out there and
and then travel more to get
and
there.
then travel more. You got to fly into Milan, then travel there and stay somewhere out there. So
Yeah.
I'm sure it's the kind of thing that if you don't have a cool $5,000, you don't even want to mess with too much. But
Oh, that sounds
someday,
cool. Yeah,
someday,
that sounds
you know,
amazing, especially in
the
Italy.
lineup's always like Jeff Darrow, Mila Monaro. I mean, it's like all these like incredible names that you never see coming to America. So or very rarely, I guess.
Yeah, that's what I liked about when we went to Heroes. It was after their little mini boom, because they were growing steadily, and then that Wizard World thing happened, where Wizard World tried to put a show really close to their date and location, and there was like a line drawn in the sand, and everybody went to Hero, so it was like a big burst real quick. And then after that, they're able to pull in overseas people pretty regularly. I was like, oh, this is
What
cool.
what's the situation with Wizard World now? Are they strong? Are they out there? Are they
So last I heard was the big scandal with the brother, I believe, of the
okay?
head cheese guy. So
Right.
the gist was he was getting the celebrities to sign his products or his items so he can sell on eBay later. But the problem was he's the one booking the guest, so or associated with. So because I thought I was like, wow, these guests are expensive, especially how many they were bringing in at a time. I was like, well, I guess the autographs and the photo sessions must pay for everything. So cool, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
But apparently that wasn't necessarily the case. I feel, and so I think they sank a lot of money into all these guests, and they weren't really recouping all of it. So because they were aggressive, they wanted to do 24 shows a year. I think
Wow.
that was the plan at one point when they really started to when the magazine was in its last like year or two, and they're really pivoting to live events.
Do you remember how big the magazine was in the early '90s?
Dude, the magazine defined the industry. It,
It was selling more copies than any comic was monthly at the
oh
time.
really? Oh wow,
Oh
I
yeah,
can see it.
they had a print run of several hundred thousand at their height.
Oh
You
wow.
know, so and it kills me that nothing's been able to fill that void since. I mean, I know we have the internet, so it's a different universe, but there's pretty much no publication that covers comics from a journalism standpoint.
Yeah, and
Um, I mean, I don't know if Comics Journal still publish, but that's a kind of very deep, hardcore
yeah,
magazine. It's
very
not doing
niche,
what Wizard did. Yeah,
very industry, I guess, super industry, financials and things like that, like hardcore numbers. It was,
and then also hardcore on the art side. You know, they'll get heavy into Fantagraphics books and things like that.
yeah,
That mainstream audiences probably aren't picking up.
yeah. That's the cool thing. Like Wizard covered a lot, and it's kind of like because I follow the MMA community. There's some reporters are like beat guys. They cover the day to day kind of ongoings, and then there's the hardcore reporter journalists where they'll hang out at a gym for 2 months and then talk to a fighter for 4 months, and then they'll do an expose that you know is long, very very long and very very in depth. But and there's only a handful of guys who do that.
Yeah, and in comics, I just feel like the money's probably not there enough to have real journalism, so it's all fan journalism pretty much,
Yeah, and I'm not
or guys who are writing articles for $10 online and things like that.
I'm not a big fan of a lot of the ones I see. I guess it's part of the beast. It's those cheap Google ads everywhere. I was like, this doesn't really speak to, and everything's very short. Everything's very like very about what's coming out immediately and not in depth coverage. And like, because UFC was the same way. You have to educate the fan base to grow it. If you just let it simmer, it won't grow very quickly. But if you start educating everybody about like the ground game and different people and different styles and different like eras and the history of it and why things came to be and why certain styles came to be, it people get way more invested. And then the stuff
Yeah.
that typically would be considered like quote unquote boring becomes really really interesting all of a sudden.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thankfully, comics have such a vibrant fan community
Hmm.
that they pick up a lot of the slack on that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's been cool. Did you ever go to the Wizard World? Did you go to the one here in Dallas or when I was in Arlington?
Hmm. Yeah, I did it a couple years back when we were publishing the Ghostworks comics and
Oh
everything
yeah,
like
that's
that.
right. I remember
Yeah.
going as a visitor, just hanging out. I was doing an online kind of newsy kind of stuff. So I was interviewing some people.
Well, you know what's funny? Since I don't really, I just dabble my toe in the industry these days. I get to be a fan again, which
Yeah,
I spent like 15 years not being able to just be a fan, and now I'm like totally a fan again. I show up to shows just to meet people and get sketches, and I don't feel like I'm there to hawk anything. It's
yeah.
really feels good, man.
Every once in a while, I get to like, all right, I'm gonna take 20 minutes and go wait in a line, and
Yeah,
then meet somebody real quick and go cool, and then have to kind of like bounce. But that's really neat. So how do
well,
you feel with the new cons? How do you feel has the vibe has changed? Has it changed to you?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
But I will say this: we both do, because I see you there a lot. I know we both attend the North Texas Comic Book Show, right? North
Mm-hmm.
Texas Comic Book Show one. That's the one that's my favorite. That's the
Okay.
one that is like totally focused on comics. There's almost no media guests
Mm-hmm.
there. He's going out of his way to bring in people that other shows don't seem to be trying to reach. You
Yeah.
know, like I don't know. I go to his show, and instead of just seeing super famous people or media guests, I'm seeing people like Phil Hester or Larry Stroman or
Mm-hmm.
Tom Rainey, Bart Sears, like all these cool people that I was reading in the '90s and just devouring their work. And North Texas Comic Book Show, since it's so focused on those artists and the fans, and it's not Wizard World, so there's not 50,000 people in there. I get to go have a long conversation with Christopher Priest,
Oh yeah,
or
that's the
get to
best
go
part.
have a great conversation with Jim Shooter or whatever. That's such a cool thing for me. It's unbelievable.
Did you get to meet Jim?
Mm-hmm.
How what was that
Yeah,
like? I read his blog and it sounds amazing. Is he that kind of personality, like kind of big personality guy?
he is. He is.
Okay.
I've met him a few times over the
Okay.
years. The last time I met him, we had a really good conversation. I had asked him. He was doing a panel, and I asked on the panel. I said, "Okay, after everything you've seen, what really moves new readers to buy comic books? Like, what actually turns a non-fan into a fan, right? That you've seen that Marvel or DC could be doing." And he said for him, in his run, the thing that he saw happen that did that the most was when they first got the Star Wars license at Marvel. He said that brought in fans that were never reading comic books that stayed.
Yeah, I can see
And
that.
I challenged him, right? Though I said, yeah, but wait a minute, hold on. Now, the Marvel movies and the MCU has created a situation where every single person knows who Iron Man is. Every single person knows who the Falcon is. But yet it hasn't really had a bump in the books. And he had the coolest answer for me ever, man. He said, well, the books suck now, right? And he just flat out said the books suck now. He said when I was editor in chief, you got a story with a beginning, middle, and end. If you go to
Yeah.
a comic shop now, most stories start, in the beginning and they go 6 to 12 issues. The books are $4 to $5 a piece. You're having to pay $60 to get an entire story out.
Yeah.
He said
In a
that's a
very
very
drawn out
for
basis.
well for a non-fan, right? For if you're someone
Mm-hmm.
who hasn't read comics, that's not an attractive way to absorb. Oh, I'm going to be in for 6 months and $75 right now to read a
Yeah.
story. That's crazy.
So in
So I
short,
agree with them.
yeah.
I agree with them. And if you go back and pick up our 80s comics or our 90s comics, especially the 80s comics, you're going to find that, oh my God, this issue of Hulk has a beginning, middle, and end story in it. And that wasn't rare back then. That was how
Yeah.
every issue was.
It was always the big summer blockbusters. Like that was I when I was remember is the big summer because I followed X-Men. And so the big X-Men summer event that they kind of like went through, and then it just
Yeah.
followed one after the other, and I just couldn't keep up.
And there's still good work being produced, and the
Mm-hmm.
art's probably at the best it's ever been in my lifetime. I mean, coloring and printing has gone to a point where you can do things on a comic page that you could never do in the 80s or 90s and have it
Yeah.
reproduced well.
And the style's all very different now. Just all over the board, which is so you can fit a style to a story whenever you want to. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, there's no house styles these
Mm-mm.
days. Everybody does their own thing. But sometimes I wonder if that doesn't hurt us either. If you look at the most popular comics in America, they're probably manga.
Mm-hmm.
And in manga, you have a much more, I wouldn't say you have a uniform look or anything, but it's more uniform than it is in American comics, which are just all over the place.
Well, the manga is always like one creator, so it's consistent, and they end. They're
And they
like
end.
there's a couple of series that go on forever, but for the most part, they have an ending, and they tell, like you said earlier, a beginning, middle, and end. It tells a full arc, and you can interact in it, and then the creators move on to something else, and they try a new franchise.
Yeah. So I think it's shifting, and this whole pandemic thing is going to, I hate to say it, but there's no way it's not going to knock out a lot of comic shops. Comic
Yeah.
shops they just don't operate at kind of margins where they can be closed for 8 weeks
Mm-hmm.
and still survive. So fortunately, the best comic shops seem to be doing fairly innovative things, having
Yeah.
online sales and doing different ways to getting at their customers right now.
Yeah,
But I'm sure when the dust clears from all this, we're going to lose a significant percentage of comic shops in this country.
that's true. I think I've seen a couple already closing, which is sad.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so many of them, you know how it is. I mean, so many of them run like hobby stores rather than professional businesses for so long.
Yeah,
You know.
I remember running into one in Denton, and I remember the hours were never consistent,
Yep.
ever.
Yep.
And I remember one time I went in and no one said anything. They were playing World of Warcraft, I think, or something, and they just ignored us. And my friend said one day he had left, and they were in the parking lot when someone ran out the store and said, "Hey, did you need something?" He's like, "It's too late now, bro. Way too late now. I've left your store."
I know that shop, and without saying its name, I'm pretty sure I know which one you're talking
Yeah,
about. And that was exactly what we're talking about. It was a guy, our age that was just a fan that really just wanted to be around comics more than wanting to like really be a professional and run a professional business.
yeah,
So it was like a great place for him and his friends to hang out. But, like you said, they didn't hold normal business practices.
yeah. That was the big key thing. Because a lot of
Hmm.
it's like even it's the medium's very solitary. They interact. I think the community is very in person. You know what I mean? Just talking to people of other comics. I remember just
Yeah.
hanging out with friends and everybody's just read like we're swapping books and just reading it is very still communal. And so, which is
Yeah.
why I always love going to these comic cons. And I know on the anime side they talk about it a lot. It's their open weekend. It's their weekend. They can be anything and they go wild, and then that Monday is a hard day to get through because they have to like go back to the office, start going back to the normal life, and then all their nerdy friends aren't really close by anymore. It's changed quite a bit since the olden days, of course, but even still, that con drop is really really real. Like that con high is also really really real.
So here's an interesting angle on this. I think I told you when we were emailing back and forth to set this up that last February I attended a Comic Con in Paris.
Oh yeah.
That was a way different experience and really cool.
Okay.
Certainly had some aspects to it that I don't see at American cons too often. First thing I'll say is I would say maybe 40 to 50% of all attendees were in cosplay.
Oh.
So if you were under 35, basically, and in the con, you were in cosplay. That was kind of cool.
Yeah, that's neat.
They did some really interesting. Now, this was a comics and manga con, actually.
Okay.
And they did some really interesting things. Like they flew in a lot of the singers who did the Parisian versions of the songs that opened the anime.
Oh, that's neat.
So there'd be concerts all over the con floor. They had a couple stages set up, and singers would come in who, of course, I had no idea who they were, but they'd start singing these anime songs in French, and the audience would just go nuts and sing every word and flip
It
out
gets
because they hear
big.
their voices. Oh my god! They had a wrestling ring set up in the middle of the Comic Con and did wrestling.
Oh, that's
That was
awesome.
cool. That was cool. Never seen anything like that before. They had a giant Dance Revolution type dance off in the middle of the Comic Con floor that like 300 people participated in.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it was way different, and it was cool, but it was massive and immersive, and it was eye opening. It was a good time, definitely.
That's cool.
Definitely.
That sounds amazing. So, what did you have like a goal in mind? Because usually when we go to a con, like me and Ruby, we'll beforehand look through the guest list. It's like, all right, who are we trying to get a sketch from? Who do you want to get a book from? Was that one just going to the con, or were you like after something?
That one was more just one. I wanted to attend an international con. I've
Okay.
never attended one on another side of the planet, and there were a couple cool artists there that we got to interact with. But mostly, it was just being there and being immersed in it. My favorite thing, without a doubt, when I go to Comic Cons is talking to creators who've inspired me. If I have an opportunity to light up Christopher Priest and tell him why his work has meant something to me, or like I got to meet Strangers in Paradise.
Oh, yeah, more,
Rachel
Terry.
Rising. I got to meet Terry Moore recently and have a long, long talk with him about Rachel Rising, and
It's fun.
I love that experience.
I was gonna say it's fun meeting him because then once you read like Strangers in Paradise and crazy emotional roller coaster that you're taking on. And then you meet him, he's just quiet dude. You're like, oh, you're not what I expected from this wild ride he took me on.
It's a very solitary art form, and so I think it has real meaning to tell somebody like how their work affected you, especially if it's at a deep level and it's not just,
Mm.
hey, I love this, sign 10 copies of it for me, please, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
So when I get to connect with somebody and really give right before he died, I got to connect with Bernie Wrightson. That
Yeah,
dude's work has meant so much to me in my life and still influences the way I draw. And to be able to share that a little bit of that with him was a great highlight for me.
that's awesome. Yeah, he's been down here a couple of times, and we ran into him on the way to Heroes, like randomly. I was going to Heroes, and then I saw we didn't get a shuttle, and so I saw guys picking up people for the con. I was like, "Hey, can you give me a recommendation on like how to get? This is the best way to get to the con. Like, is it the shuttle?" And he saw my banner stand bag. He's like, "Are you guys artist alley?" I was like, "Yeah, like we're just setting up." And he goes, "Oh, just ride with us." I'm like, "Oh, cool." And
Oh, that's
we
tough.
get in the van. It's Bernie, Coley Hamner, and Eric Canetti. I was like,
Oh,
ah,
talent,
shit, this is
talent.
cool.
That's a lot of talent in that band,
Yeah,
man.
and it was funny because Jake was sitting with Bernie. Bernie's like, "Oh, I'm Bernie," and Jake's like, "Yeah, I totally know." There's that weird moment. It's like, "Oh, this is interesting." That was cool.
He's
It's
an
like a short little
amazing
ride.
artist.
Yeah, it was so good.
Probably the most important artist ever to work in horror comics in America, I would say. You know.
Yeah, it was amazing. I remember seeing some of his work at Heroes. I was floating around too much. I couldn't hop around and stick too long in one area. But seeing his work is amazing.
Oh, I got one hanging on my wall. Let me
Oh,
grab it real
whoa.
quick.
Ooh.
All right. So this was a print that I picked up when I saw him, and then I hand colored it myself.
Oh, cool.
So,
Oh, nice. Oh, that's cool.
and I was able to bring it back to Liz after he passed and show it to her and show her the colors and everything like that. And that was a cool experience, man.
That's cool.
Yeah. I'm sorry we lost him, but what a legacy and how much good work did this guy leave behind? And now his originals are selling. Sold an original sold. They didn't get anything from it, but an original from Frankenstein sold at Sotheby's recently for over $1 million.
Oh, whew.
He probably sold it for 5,000 back in the day or something.
Yeah.
But
It gets tricky. I remember reading about a couple in New York, and their art collection is worth a ton of money, and it's big because they caught on a lot of people super early in their career, and so they picked up a lot of pieces that were when they're like kind of struggling and just up and comers, and it's like, oh, I'll support these artists, and then they become big deals later on.
I'm kind of frustrated with myself because in the '90s, like I knew that this collecting original art was there's only one of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not like comics. There's millions of copies or tens of thousands at the very least. But original art, it's one piece. And so, in the '90s when I was like a teenager or in my early 20s, I did spend some money and get some pieces, I got some behind me
Okay.
that are worth quite a bit now. But oh my god, the way rates have gone up. I mean, most McFarlane or Liefeld pages even are worth tens of thousands of dollars
Yeah, I
these
remember.
days.
It's
And in the '90s, we'd see that stuff sitting around for $200 a page everywhere.
I remember floating by a table and a guy was selling original pages for like $60 and maybe even 20. Because I remember I was looking through some of it like, oh, this is kind of neat. I was really really young then, but I heard him talking to another guy. He's like, oh wow, like these are really cheap. He goes, oh yeah, you gotta get them young. You gotta get them with these small pieces, and then we'll lead up because he had another folder of like 300, 500, $800 pieces. I think he's the same. I saw him at Heroes. It's a giant booth, and they just have bins and bins of portfolios, and
Yeah.
they're alphabetical. So you're like, oh, I'm looking for this person. You just pull the folder out. They're all tied together, so you don't run off with it, and it's just full of just original pieces. And some of there's like miscellaneous, like, oh, this is kind of neat, just random art pieces from like random books here and there.
It's amazing, and I'm connected to a few collectors groups online, and just to see some of these guys who have these massive collections of like 60s and 70s Buscema and Ramita and Ditko, and it's, oh my God, these guys have collections they're sitting on that are $10 million collections and stuff like that. That again in the '90s would have been $10,000 worth of investment. It's
Mm-hmm.
probably several $1 million worth of comic pages now.
Yeah, I remember seeing them. They're really. It's been a really long time though. Like I remember going to the Wizard World and seeing Aspen pages for
Wow.
the first time, and like they're in the sleeves, and I remember touching the cover, and I've touched the artwork through the sleeves. I was like, I can feel the ink, and you can see it. Like you can see there's a little layer of ink, and it just sits on top of the paper, being in the paper. I was like, oh, this is amazing. It's like when I went to go see Starry Night for the first time over in New York.
Hmm.
The depth cannot be translated into
Oh,
in a
you mean the
photo.
actual Van Gogh?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah.
Seeing that
Yeah.
and also seeing Liechtenstein was very disappointing to me in person
Oh,
because
really?
when I was a kid, I was assigned him to like replicate his art because my teacher's like, you like comics, try this as a painting.
Every one of us.
Yeah,
Yeah. Every
it's,
art teacher. Oh, you love comics. You must love
yeah.
Liechtenstein.
So I
Yeah,
did it. I
absolutely.
looked at the work and I was like, okay, so I masked off everything, every curve, every. I try to get perfect dots. Then when I saw it in person, I was like, oh, these lines are messy. He didn't mask
Ah.
anything. The dots are just little paint dots. I was trying to figure out how do I mask these tiny little. Do I make it? How do I make a homemade silkscreen? I was like, when was I? A freshman in high school. I had no idea what this was. I was like, how do I do this? And then I was like, I guess he just has the equipment. Then I saw the piece in person for the first time. I was like, oh, this is a sham. God damn it.
That's funny. Yeah, man, I love original art. I wish I had collected a lot more. I wish I had money to collect it now, but at high prices, I just don't. You
The
know.
industry has changed quite a bit. Like I guess it grew up from that '90s. I think comics always had like a collector mentality. There's always been like a collector aspect to the Comic Con scene. If you go
Yeah, I
to,
don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that's good. It promotes commerce.
mm-hmm, it's just different because I know in the anime side, it's mostly about. It used to be about collecting, but the vendor room is pretty like even right now. Everyone kind of has the same thing. There's a few rare finds here and there, but the whole thing is about the events now and being at the con, going to the concerts, doing the late night parties, doing all the different panels and things like that. It's more about going and feeling the experience. Because I remember talking to one of the con heads and we were like, why is this sudden shift? There's way more concerts now. He's like, with the internet coming out, the big part of anime shows back in the day was seeing the new anime and finding the new shows and discovering new shows. But now with the internet, that's not difficult anymore. You can do it at home. But what can't you have at home is that live experience, is the concert. One of Ruby's friends flew down from New York to see a band. And it's like, is it worth it? It's like, they're never coming to America. This is their first time in America.
Yeah.
I can't see them anywhere else. So here I go. So she flew all the way down, and that's all she did. And then she just hung out for the whole weekend. That was her goal, just to see them in concert. And I was like, okay, I can see this.
Yeah. Well, through the non-for-profit work that we've done in Dallas through Art Love Magic, immersive
Mm-hmm.
live events was like, I got a PhD in it. I've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of those, and with a massive team, and just I love that. And I love trying to create experiences that will happen one time. One
Mm-hmm.
time. If you're not there and you don't see it happen, there's not something like that happening next time.
Yeah.
Whether it's a live creative jam or mixing one art form with another art form and getting famous people to create live and stuff like that. Those are cool, unforgettable experiences. And I do think cons should embrace that. And I
Mm-hmm.
think cons should embrace live art a lot more than they do. You hardly ever see live art at cons other than people just maybe drawing in their lap.
Yeah. The
But
Heroes is that way. Heroes has a stage.
does it?
Mm-hmm. It has a stage. I remember sitting there, and it's Brian Stelfreeze and Phil Noto, and they're both painting. I was
That's,
like,
yeah, see?
and the audience is enwrapped. I remember trying to talk somebody on
Yeah.
stage. and someone behind me is like, "Yo, can you move?" Like, oh shit, you are like enwrapped in watching this. So the audience,
Yeah.
they've cultivated a very art centric audience. Like, well, the year I went, I heard someone had lined up at 4 in the morning to get to somebody, because some of those artists, like, I get 5 people and that is it for the weekend. And so,
Well, and I know we've like in a lot of the big cons, and I know you've been to a lot of these. At night, they end up having these live art parties or live art
mhm,
auctions.
mhm.
I just think they should bring some of that back to the con floor. You know,
Oh
like
yeah,
those experiences that are happening in bars are so cool and so unique. Just bring some of that back to the con floor.
that's true. Yeah, it's yeah, most of, like I was saying earlier, most comic cons are collectors. So once you go to the show and you kind of like walk the vendor room and talk to the artist alley, you're not there's not more to do, so you're not coming back. Like an anime show, you get set up at Thursday night and you're not leaving the venue until Sunday morning. So they're there the entire time because there's stuff to do all the time, stuff to experience all the time.
The Dallas Fantasy Fair used to be like that. You were talking
Okay.
about that. I remember when I was a teenager and we would go to the Fantasy Fair, we would go Friday and leave Sunday.
Oh,
And
okay.
and we didn't have a room. You sleep
Hmm.
in the video rooms, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, and you smell pretty bad by Sunday, but we were 17. What do you want?
Yeah. I remember hearing talking to some security guys. Like, yeah, I saw 3 guys. They somehow crammed themselves in the one of the bathroom stalls. That they're leaning against each other and the wall, and they're able to pass out there
Yeah, that wasn't me.
and have their feet up. I was like, oh, that's hilarious. I remember looking through the program book and seeing the night events for Dallas Fantasy Fair and reading about it and going, oh, that's cool. I want to do that, and then it shut down. I was like, ah, damn it.
They'd have all night rooms that would show like Godzilla movies or weird old animes, and we would just sleep on the floor in the back of one of those rooms.
Hmm. I remember a lot of my friends talk about that back in the old Acon days. It's pretty common. It's hilarious. Crosses all genres.
Yeah. So, but I love shows, and I think there's more places to go with shows than mostly what you see, which is just dealers, couple media guests, that kind of thing. Overpriced chili nachos, you know.
I work on my nacho blog. I always get nachos from different venues and cons, and I take pictures of them. So I have a log of all of them and different how they change in different areas. It's kind of fun.
Yeah,
Have you ever been to Dragon Con?
I haven't.
Okay, that's the one. That's talking about earlier. That's the one I keep hearing about. People are saying, at least back in the day, they're like, go at least one time. You have to just
Mm.
see and feel the experience. I'm not sure how much of it has changed since back in the day, but it still seems kind of strange and like experiential. From what I've heard, a lot of people are setting up panels and events just in the hallway in different areas. So there's official events going on, and then unofficial things just kind of like popping up all over the different places that can, I guess, eventually become panels and become like a thing and an attraction. Um, and the cosplay is pretty interesting there. Like they have a weird. This is a safe space for anything kind of vibe. Because I remember someone went as the Aurora shooter, like later
Oh,
that year, and then someone went as the biracial person later that year. I was like, oh, okay. They just it's the whole gamut of it. I was like, okay, it's an interesting space to like be in where everybody's trying to like push certain lines and see how far they can get. A lot of it's kind of like self-referential too. So I remember hearing about someone cosplaying as the carpet. Like
okay.
they found like because it's funny. I can almost recognize a lot of Texas shows from the cosplay photos from the carpet. It's like I know that venue, I know that place. And I remember one year we went to Anime Fest and we're all just super lost. Like what? This feels weird. What's going on? And then someone figured out, like, oh, the carpet changed. And we asked them, I was like, oh yeah, we just changed it like 2 months ago. I was like, oh, that's why this place looks weird. Because we've been going to
Funny.
that same venue for like 10 years with the exact same carpet. And then they changed it, just completely threw us off.
Now, have you ever done San Diego?
Mm-mm. I, I don't want to anymore. Like, I think what
Yeah,
I had wanted out of it is not there anymore.
that's how I feel. Chris, I've done it multiple times. I've
Oh,
done
that's
it a
right,
couple times.
yeah.
I've done it a couple times as a fan. I did it once with Head Press in the early '90s, and I did it once with Ghostworks in the mid '90s,
Okay.
and had great times, had phenomenal times. But I do recognize that going now means being in a sea of 100,000 people, and that the comics certainly aren't the most popular thing at Comic Con anymore, and all that. So it's probably not for me much
Yeah.
anymore. But
I wouldn't
it was something.
mind it. I wouldn't mind going now because the comic area isn't as robust as it used to be or busy as it used to be. So everybody's standing in line for that Hall H, whatever. And so
Yeah,
I would imagine the other area would be like, oh, this is way more chill. Everybody's on that side. But trying
I
to
don't think there's
get
anywhere
there.
that's chill at that
Yeah.
con anymore.
No strollers, no bag, like no like luggage bags and none of that, all that kind of stuff. So it's probably super tight.
I'm probably going to end up having to go again because Christy's never been and she wants
Oh,
to.
okay.
But I'm always like, oh, it's not going to be as cool as you think, you know.
Yeah, but just being seeing the spectacle of it would be kind of interesting. Like just the that's the other cool thing about these bigger shows is when Marvel, DC, Warner Brothers, Disney show up, they bring like a gigantic booth and they bring a full $1 million experience for you to go through.
I'm not sure they still do that
Oh,
though. I don't
okay.
know if they're still doing that. They did it back in the day, without a doubt. Marvel and DC used to have massive setups, but I don't know if that's still the case or not. It may be. I haven't been in a couple of years.
Okay. But yeah, San Diego is not there
Yeah, it's not
anymore.
San Diego anymore. Actually, it's Anaheim these days, right?
Is it? Did it move?
I'm pretty sure it's in Anaheim now.
Oh, okay. Wow. I remember for a while they were talking about moving because I remember they dropped the San Diego part of their name and just called themselves like Comic Con
Comic Con.
International,
Yeah,
and that was part of a power move to get because they're bidding with certain cities about moving the con. So like Vegas wanted them, LA wanted them, San Diego wanted them to stay. Yeah, once you get to these big national level of cons, they venue will start bidding for each other, trying to get it away
sure.
from other places. It's,
Yeah.
it's changed a lot. I remember going to shows and it was just an artist, an Itoya portfolio book, a book, and a banner stand, and that's it.
Yeah.
No big setups, no wall of prints, no gigantic run of merchandising.
Well, how about when I started doing Comic Cons, nobody would show up with just prints. That
Hmm.
would be a little bit of a faux pas. When I started doing them, everybody who had a table had a book,
Yeah,
you
for
know.
real.
And now, no, hardly anybody has a book. Like one out of every five
No,
or 10 artists has a book now.
I roll through because we end up in the vendor hall a lot, working the vendor hall. So I'll go through the artist alley to do a quick reconnaissance to see if I can find a book for Ruby. Nope, never, not anymore. Like maybe one or two, and it's like, oh, not the missing out on the genre, but is a book at
Yeah.
least, you know?
No, when I started doing cons, if you had a table at a con, that meant you had a book to promote, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and it was really about making comics. And now the vast majority of artists that those are just doing prints, you know, all
Yeah,
kinds of different prints of their favorite pop culture characters and stuff like that.
a lot of the original content's gone online. It seems like they're on different formats, but they're promoting the original content online, and then I guess at some point they become a guest or start marketing. But we'll have
Yeah,
to.
I don't know.
It's changed a lot over the
I don't
years.
know. People don't make comics anymore, man. You know, and I worry about that when I see all these young artists at shows, and like almost none of them have actual comic work that they've created. Although maybe, like you said, it's showing up somewhere else. They're all doing webtoons or something that I'm not seeing.
I've told certain people who has books like you can't just go to any con anymore. Like not like it used to be. You have to be very picky about where you go. Like I told people,
Mm.
go down to Staple down in
Oh,
Austin.
Staples, way cool. That's a show that feels different from other shows,
Hmm.
and is worth attending.
Super indie friendly, all about books, all about original content. And, not a lot of people are looking for quite a bit of fan art. It's people are looking for original works, and Heroes is the same way. I remember like the first year I went, I just bought prints because I wasn't quite ready, and no one cared. No one looked at me. And then the next year I came back with originals, people stopped. And
Nice.
then I saw Jake So he had a book. He had his book on the table, and someone had walked up and they asked, "Is this your book?" And before Jake said yes, and before he even got to the elevator pitch of what it was, the guy just bought it. It's like cool. On
Yeah.
it, I was like, oh, okay. So if you have an indie book, there's a couple of shows that are really catered to you. Have you heard of?
I heard Ape is cool. The
Mm-hmm.
Alternative Press Expo. I've never been to that one, but I'd really like to go someday.
Ape. My friend goes to Dink in Colorado. He said he did really good there. He always walks away with a bigger fan base than he did before.
Nice.
Let's see what else is there. Yeah, like for the original art stuff and the original content stuff, I always felt it's always Emerald City, like Heroes, Emerald City, New York, C2E2.
Yeah.
That's about it, I think.
So what's your do you have a favorite meeting a famous comic artist story or anything like that?
The f- Jim Lee. I remember running
Oh,
to Jim Lee, and he was looking through Ruby's book, and she has like the original character designer for Vampire Hunter D, the original character designs for like Sailor Moon. So he was like, "Oh, cool!" And she has all the other anime and manga guys, and she has a piece of Monkey Punch for the guy who made Lupin. And so he flipped through. He's like, "I can draw anime," and he draws this like strong bad style, really bad chibi head anime character. And then I was with her, and he was like, "I'll draw you one too." And I was like, "This is like the most unique Jim Lee sketch
wow.
ever." It's horrible. See if I can. Do I have the book somewhere close by?
He's
Probably
been
not.
killing it this week doing.
Oh yeah.
Have you been following him? What he's doing for comic shops right now?
Mm-hmm. Doing those original pieces and auctioning them off. That's been the community has to come back together. Like that's we
Yeah.
self-regulated back in the day with the comic book code. Um, it's a small family. Everybody knows each other. You know what I mean? It's not.
A little bit too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
the, the
No,
the
it's.
the clubhouses sometimes gets a little too small. It's like, yeah, we need to open it up a little bit.
I've definitely, and I'm not in the industry like this to where it's personal experiences, but I know enough people who are, and I think it's definitely true. The comics are still small enough that there's about 3 or 4 people, maybe 5 people that you can piss off that will ruin your entire career if you piss them off.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of thing. Yeah,
I
it's a shame.
I remember
Because you
thinking.
figure 90% of all comic commerce in the country comes through Marvel and DC. So.
Oh yeah. Well, it does now. I love this indie scene that's growing up. That's being once we got like digital printing. My podcast with Carl, he talks about his college project because he was printmaking. He made like all the sheets and all the plates to make his book and all that stuff. But nowadays, I can just go online and find a book printer that will give me 20 copies, and I don't have to order 1,000 units. You know, I was like, oh, this is awesome.
And yet we're all making less comics now. Explain that to me.
Yeah, the format's changing. I think, like I said, a lot of
There was
it's
so much more work. There was so much more work back in the day. I mean, the earliest comics that I did, you know, we had to print out lettering and then cut it out and tape it down to boards. I was cutting out Zipatone for the pages, you know, stuff you'd never do now.
yeah, for real.
But I was a lot more prolific then than I am now, so who knows?
I think this, like you said earlier, with the storytelling, it's so long. You can't engage an audience anymore for like 6 months, $70 investment when there's other forms of entertainment out there. I remember when Vince McMahon was running WWE, they're like, well, the other wrestling company isn't just our competitor. We're competing with NBA, NFL. We're entertainment. And so
Yeah.
it's not just a one-to-one thing. We're competing with all sorts of things. And so, which is why I think someone said why the Lakers have a hard time keeping fans for a long period of time is because, or the filling up the arena, is because if the team kind of sucks and no one wants to see it, and there's so many other things to do in the area, so they just won't go to the game. So it's only the arena is only really packed when the team is super hot, compared to like Cowboy Stadium. They just have fans, and if the team's hot or not, they're just gonna have fans. They're gonna like go to the games all the time. And so I think comics with there's other things they're competing with, especially like video games. Video games are very immersive. They tell a story, you walk through it, and sometimes the comic book games that come out, like the Batman series, like, oh, this is amazing. This is awesome.
Well, if you go all the way back to like Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud, which that was probably published in '90 or something,
Hmm.
even in that, he's talking about the fact that if the best thing the comics can offer fans is male power fantasies, young male power fantasies, we're in real trouble because video games are going to be able to do that way, way, way better than we are.
Oh yeah, it's a very like highly immersive experience.
Sure, sure. So, just being really strong and punching people can't be everything that we have to offer. And fortunately, there's been such an independent explosion. I mean, mostly driven by Image. I think Image has done really, really good for the comics industry and really opened it up to different genres. It seemed like it wasn't that long ago where almost everything published was superhero comics. And you look at Image now, and they hardly publish any superhero comics
Yeah,
anymore.
for real. I think that's another reason why manga does really well.
Yeah, I
The
agree.
the storytelling is the storytelling, and the backdrop can be anything. There's my favorite manga is about a board game, about a kid growing up and learning how to play a board game via a haunted board. And there's a couple cooking ones that I find amazing that even have workable recipes they'll give you at the end of the book. It's like, hey, here's that thing they cooked. I was like, you can do it too. And it's just
Sports is a big genre in manga. It doesn't even exist in America. There's like hardly any comics around
yeah,
sports in America. Yeah.
that's true. Yeah. Have you ever heard
So
the thing about have you ever looked at Pokemon? Pokemon's a sports manga.
okay, yeah, I
He's
get
he
that.
all these things, he loses, he becomes better, he's trying to earn a certain rank. The whole story is about him
Sure.
becoming a better, like, quote unquote athlete in their league, and he just kind of grows up into that kind of stuff.
So so the comics that I do these days are mostly for the corporate sector, right? I still do comics, but I don't do them for the world we're talking about. I do them for corporate research projects and stuff like that. So I have the joy of doing comics about a lot of different things. I do
That's
comics about
cool.
school, I do comics about work environment, corporate concerns, and stuff like that. And I've always felt like I was carrying on something that I saw Will Eisner do when I
Okay.
was a kid. Will Eisner was always my big hero. Frank Miller was actually my real big hero, but once I started learning stuff, Will Eisner became my big hero. And Will made comics about fixing Jeeps and growing
Oh
plants
yeah.
and paying your taxes. And so I always loved that. And like, for instance, this is my latest corporate comic that I've done. Let me see, get it on
Oh,
screen
there we
here.
go.
But this is about education. And this is about the health and well-being of teachers, right? And what I find too, it was funny when I started doing comics like this. Um, what I found is that the techniques that artists like you and I have slaved over our whole life to learn, they're overblown in a lot of ways. My audience for my research comics does not want real complex page layouts. They don't want high levels of detail. They want it to read
Mm-hmm.
fast and communicate information and be kind of charming to the eye.
Yeah.
But
Th-
on my first draft of my first corporate comic, I turned in the work, and they immediately were like, "Oh, I don't like this at all. This doesn't look like what you draw on whiteboards in our meetings. That's what we
uh,
wanted. We want
okay.
what you draw on whiteboards. We want those simple cartoons and the big happy images." And all of a sudden, what I realized was they were looking for, in some ways, less of a level of work than I had grown up on in comics. Right? You and me had slaved forever on how to
Yeah.
draw this correct three perspective thing and how to layer this panel over this panel. And my corporate clients are just like, no, I just needed to read fast and be very, very clear. So it's funny because I make more per page in doing a corporate comic than I would ever do doing a comic for the comic book industry. But on top of it, it's less work as well because they don't want that level of
Yeah.
detail that Marvel and DC want ever since Jim Lee came into the industry.
Well, I think it's almost kind of true in the big Marvel DC world. Can you imagine the money, the licensing they were making on like Star Wars and Tomb Raider? You know what I mean? Like those are big. Those are big gigs. I think with the corporate side, they want a new or different format of infographics because it's
Mm-hmm.
more about just relaying information, like you said, relaying information very very quickly. And the best part is like comic books are a very good format for that. Like it's a good way to get across complex subject matters.
I sold a huge comic job once because the clientele for it was not necessarily, college educated, and came from a lot of the clientele was English second language
Okay.
speakers, right? So it was a lot of delivery drivers and stuff
Mm-hmm.
for a major retailer. And I convinced them because they were trying to figure out, how do we communicate to all these people? We've got a lot to get across to our drivers, but they speak 10 languages and most of
Yeah.
them aren't educated above high school. And I convinced them that this was the line I used, and I've used this to sell a lot of comics. I said, when you get on an airplane, there's a reason why your emergency instructions come in comics form.
Mm.
And it's because travelers come from all over the globe. They read different language. They need to be able to communicate in pictures super, super clear so everybody understands it and everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, I can
Sold
see
a
that.
couple jobs on that. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's that's why the IKEA furniture is amazing. Those instructions are like, yep, I get this completely, and I don't, I don't need the languages. I just need a visual aspect of it. That's cool.
So, it's funny too, because like it's funny because when I'm in my corporate world, people are careful. They're like, "Is it okay if I call you a cartoonist? Is that an insult, right?" And for me, I'm like, that's what Will Eisner was. I love
Yeah.
that. You can put that on my gravestone. But the same thing is when I go into a comic shop sometimes, or Comic Con, and I show this, they're like, "Oh, you're doing corporate comics. Oh, that's nice. Well, maybe someday you'll be able to get a good career in kind." And it's like, I can't win either side.
Uh, I always I tell people you go back all the way. It's Michelangelo, Leonardo, Raphael, like all the turtles. They were hired artists. They had patrons that hired them to paint this ceiling or do this thing. They're
Yeah.
corporate gigs.
Yeah, without a doubt. I always tell when I'm mentoring or working with young artists, I always tell them, forget this. School gives you this kind of dream that you're going to be able to put whatever you want on canvas or paper, and people are just going to throw money at you for. That's nonsense. You get paid in 99% of the time. You get paid for fulfilling a need for someone,
Mm-hmm.
right? When I do corporate comics, they have a need I'm fulfilling. That's why they're paying me, not just because I'm brilliant and creative and can just come up
Yeah.
with cool ideas or whatever.
Like you're not a. At that point, it's like you're not a voice of a nation. You're not carrying that burden of like representing a generation or a movement. You're here to make sure that this company gets their message across to their audience quickly.
I graduated from University of North Texas with a painting and drawing degree, and they're still graduating thousands of people every year with the idea that they're going to have a career as a gallery artist.
Yeah.
I mean, I know 2,000 artists or something in the Dallas area. I maybe know one or two that make their living being a gallery artist. There's almost no one.
Yeah.
Um, there's, it's ridiculous.
I remember
You
the.
get paid by filling needs.
I remember that was the issue with the Art Institute as well. Like
Hmm.
they didn't call anybody. It's like we're just gonna graduate a couple hundred people every year. And I remember my professor in college, because I graduated from the same school as a design degree. My teacher's like, look, when you're graduating, so is SMU, so is Austin, so is Rice. Like, there's a whole gang of kids coming out there, and so not everybody's gonna make it, which is why the program was so tough. It's like we gotta dwindle it down to the people who are actually gonna can make a career out of this and drive through it. And so I think I started with 200 some odd students, and I graduated like 77.
Mm,
It was a big.
yeah.
So yeah, that's right. I forgot you went to UNT. Did you ever try to get more comic booky kind of stuff into your projects?
All the time. Yeah, I had a couple good teachers who allowed it too. I
That's
was able to
cool.
I was able to convince one of my painting teachers that I was like, "Why is inking different than painting? Explain it to me, and then if we can agree on it, I'll do it." But I like showed him, this is the brush I use, this is how I apply it, and from then on there, he let me turn in inked comic pages as
Oh,
paintings.
cool. I
Hmm.
always snuck them in my designs. So all my letters for like my fake client, wherever it was, he's doing a shipment to Wayne Enterprises, or the address is always the Richards building down in, or the Baxter building down in New York, and stuff. Because there's I think the Baxter building actually has an address, so I always
Mm,
snagged it. I was like, okay, cool. So it was like tucked away in all my pieces.
nice,
That's
nice.
cool. Like, it's always like showcasing people who have a career out of being an artist. Like, because I know I run a lot of parents selling the art supplies. I run a lot of parents like, so what are their options after a certain point? Because I know we go to art school and we have high school art, but our teachers and our mentors never talk about after you graduate. Like
Mm,
what do you do? Like what's the path in which these kids can take their art and become have a career? But I'm a designer, and so I tell people my day job isn't my passion. Like, I have these skill sets, I can make it work. I use my artistic skills to make this look nice, but I'm not really passionate about selling Weber grills for $200 off or for Fourth of July weekend. But
right.
it pays my bills. It uses my artistic background, and then I have to go find my artistic passion elsewhere. Hence
Well,
this kind
and
of
I
stuff.
think, but that's huge too, though, right? That you found a way to earn that uses your artistic passion. That's God. I mean, that's everything, right? Rather than doing something that has no connection to you personally. And then when you're doing that, you don't really have any strategic advantage to keep clients or to get new clients. If you're just doing something that anybody can do, or that can be filled, a position that can be filled by anyone, man, that's they don't need you,
Yeah,
right? But my clients that I work with as a facilitator and an artist, and making comics for them, and doing illustrations for their books, and helping leading their meetings, most of my clients, if they let me go tomorrow, they wouldn't be able to replace me at all. They'd have to just pursue a different strategy.
that makes a lot of sense. Cool.
The more you can combine disparate skills, right?
Mm.
Like, I've always been an artist, but my dad made sure, even as supporting me as an artist, and he wasn't an artist, but he was super supportive of me as an artist, but he also made sure I knew how to handle myself in a business meeting, in a professional environment.
Mm-hmm.
He made sure I understand the basics of, business and finance and corporate world, so that now I walk into those environments and I'm surrounded by people who have the same business knowledge that I have, but I'm the only person in the room that can draw,
Yeah.
right? So it gives me those two skills, understanding business and understanding comics and cartooning and communicating messages, makes me unique in those environments and gives me job security.
For real. I remember in my design classes, they approached it like very much like an agency. It's like, so when I got into the real world and working at like in-house and agency places, it felt familiar. It's like I know how to act
Mm,
in these environments because my professors they just acted like creative directors or art directors. I was like, okay, this is what, and some are good and some are great. And then when I got into the real world, like, oh, okay, I can see people who made it but not quite, and I can compare it to my professors. Like, okay, this is the environment we need to really spur on a creative thought process.
hmm
So where
Yeah.
can people? I was gonna wrap it up. So where can people find you
Sure.
online?
If they want to go look for me online, I'm at michaellagocki.com, Lagocki. Latest project, and this
Yeah.
is from the corporate world. This is a book on the health and well-being of teachers that I worked on,
Hmm.
called Whole. This is a brand new book, was just published. With every book from my research client, I always do a corresponding comic book to open the conversation, right?
Okay.
So, like, this comic book was published about 6 months prior to the book coming out, so that we could take this to
Hmm.
conferences and to our clients and start the conversation early. So we always start the conversation with a comic because it's such an easy way to communicate, rather than opening up a whole book and going through 300 pages of
Yeah.
research and data.
That's super smart.
Yeah.
That's a
But
really good
Whole,
strategy.
the author's name is Rex Miller. That's my mentor. And if you're involved in education or anything like that, this is about the health and well being of educators in our system, which, if you're a teacher, it's pretty tough right these
Yeah.
days.
For real, especially these days now. Whew.
Well, these days, it's different than it's ever been. These
Yeah.
specific days.
Yeah, my stepson said he was on spring break when everything went locked down, and so apparently the teachers had like a week or two to convert their lessons over to a digital format, and then it was indefinite. And because he was hanging out our house for spring break, and spring break got extended, and then we get a sudden text like, "Oh, they're starting school tomorrow, so bring them back." It's like, okay, you had to drive across town all of a sudden.
Wow.
Yeah, they're getting through that. He's learning, so that's a good part of it.
we're all going to come out of this different than we went into it. Like the
Mm-hmm.
whole nation's going to learn new skills, and we're going to shed some of the bad ways we were doing stuff. And hopefully, there'll be more positive coming out of this because there's going to be a lot of pain and a lot of people losing
Yeah.
economic stability, a lot of people getting sick, unfortunately, all that.
It's a real world kind of. I'm also interested in seeing what art comes out of it, like
Yes.
music and movies, and like we'll see a couple things, couple years from now, like a decade, like really, we look back and see what happens after this. But I'm also curious about see what happens like right now, what comes out of it. Be
I
interesting to
definitely
see.
think if you're an artist or a creative right now, you know, not to push it into productivity porn, but you should be creating something to reflect this moment. Going into the future, you're going to look back on this moment and probably want to have something that represents the way you felt during this.
Yeah, just even if it's like personal, just I always tell kids just draw if you feel it. We all have our mental hangups and mental things issues that we're dealing with, and I feel art's always been a good outlet, especially for people who do it already. It's like use this is the circle you live in. Use it to help heal and help move you through this process. Uh,
Yeah,
that's a
it's
great
our
way.
language.
Mm-hmm. That's a good way to put it. Is our language. It's how we communicate with everybody, and with ourselves too.
Hmm. Yeah, without a doubt.
Cool. So
And doing stuff like you're doing. I mean, trying to share perspective and expose people to different ideas and different ways of looking at all this. That's cool, man.
I'm trying. Like I'm because running to new people at cons is amazing. There's a lot of artists I've met. Just I randomly walk by their booth, like, oh, this is neat, and I run into somebody, and that's what they're counting on. That's what they're hoping to do to expand their brand, to make money, to get their book out there. And I know a lot of these people don't have that avenue anymore, so we have to turn it online. We have to go digital and try something.
I'll be looking forward to the con scene coming back though, and
Ooh.
seeing those familiar faces. Every time I go to a con, I seem to bump into you and
Mm-hmm.
Warlick, some Max and Khalid and guys that I've just known in the scene for so long.
I remember there's a handful of like nightlife people at the anime scene that I
Mm,
come to know. It's like, oh, you're the guy in orange with the tall boots. Like, oh, you're that raver girl because they always have they're a character. They have a certain outfit and a certain look, and that's who
yeah,
they are throughout the show. And it's fun. I miss it. I'm looking forward to it again.
yeah, me too.
Cool.
Me too, man.
All right, let's wrap this up. So I'm gonna hit where I'll add links at the bottom for everybody over here for everybody to look at. Follow the links. We'll do more of these. Find Mike on his website down there, and be safe. Take it easy. Wash your hands.
And I appreciate it. I hope everybody's safe and happy and having a good time and reading some good comics.
Woo. And